There is a great deal of confusion and deception on the internet concerning when the beginning of the month is according to Yahuah'S time. Today, we are not here to debate opinions or traditions. We are here to settle the matter by Scripture alone. We will examine exactly what the Scriptures say, and just as importantly, what they do not say. We will define the words used in Scripture, compare them to scriptural pattern, and allow the word to speak for itself. At the end of this teaching, the choice will be clear. Will we choose what the Scriptures plainly declare, or will we choose man's interpretation of what they believe the Scriptures mean? To understand Yahuah'S calendar, we must let Scripture define its own terms. Today, we will examine two key words used by Scripture, appear and beginning. And we will prove from Scripture that the beginning of the month is day 1, not the first work day, not a day after, and not something hidden. Let's begin. To understand Yahuah'S calendar, we must begin exactly where Scripture begins, with the words it uses. The first word we must define is the word appear. We are not going to rely on modern assumptions or theological traditions. We are going to let the language in Scripture define this word for us. The dictionary definition of appear. Appear means to come into sight, to become visible, to be seen, to present itself to the eye, to emerge from a state of non-visibility into visibility. Appearance requires visibility. If something does not appear, it cannot be seen. If it cannot be seen, it cannot function as a sign. At this point, something very important must be made clear. We are not using modern astronomical or calculation systems. We are using biblical Scripture. When Scripture says new moon, it is not referring to a dark moon. Scripture does not define the new moon or any appointed time by an invisible conjunction or by mathematical calculation. Scripture defines the new moon as Hadash, renewal, which occurs when light is received and becomes visible. Everything we are teaching comes directly from the text itself, Torah, the prophets, and Hanuk, not from modern astronomy. Those who begin their month with the dark moon are therefore using a modern astronomical or calculation system, not the biblical scriptural system. Scripture does not identify months by invisible events. It identifies appointed days by observable signs. In other words, dark moon is a calculation. Hadash is an observation. Before defining the word appear any further, we must first look at the context Scripture gives concerning the moon itself. Scripture records laws governing the luminaries, and within those laws, it identifies a specific moment when the moon becomes relevant to timekeeping. Hanuk, Enoch, chapter 73, verses 1 through 6. R.H. Charles translation. And after this law, I saw another law dealing with the smaller luminary, which is named the moon. And her circumference is like the circumference of the heaven. And her chariot in which she rides is driven by the wind, and light is given to her in measure. And her rising and setting change every month. And her days are like the days of the sun. And when her light is uniform, it amounts to the 7th part of the light of the sun. And thus she rises, and her first phase in the east comes forth on the 30th morning. And on that day she becomes visible and constitute for you the first phase of the moon on the 30th day, together with the sun in the portal where the sun rises. And the 1/2 of her goes forth by a 7th part, and her whole circumference is empty without light, with the exception of 1/7 part of it, the 14th part of her light. Now, let's break down this text. And her first phase in the east comes forth on the 30th morning, and on that day she becomes visible and constitutes for you the first phase of the moon. When the text states the first phase of the moon, this first phase of the moon is called Hadash. Hadash is the first visible phase of the moon. This is the phase Scripture is identifying when it says the moon becomes visible. Now, let's look at the same Scripture, but in the Sefer translation. Hanuk, Enoch, chapter 73, verses 1 through 5. After this law, I beheld another law of an inferior luminary, the name of which is the moon, and the orb of which is as the orb of heaven. Its chariot secretly ascends, the wind blows, and light is given to it by measure. Every month at its exit and entrance, it becomes changed, and its periods are as the periods of the sun. And when the moon is full, its light is a 7th portion from the light of the sun. Thus it rises, and at its commencement towards the east goes forth for 30 days. At that time it appears and becomes to you the beginning of the month. 30 days with the sun in the gate from which the sun goes forth. Half of it is in extent 7 portions, one, and the whole of its orb is void of light, except for a 7th portion out of 14 portions of its light. As we break this scripture down, it says, at the time it appears and becomes to you the beginning of the month. One witness says the moon becomes visible. Another witness says the moon appears. These are not two different events. They are two descriptions of the same moment. This is why we must define the word appear. Scripture itself equates appearance with visibility. The moon does not begin the month when it is hidden. It begins the month when it can be seen. Now, let's lock in this understanding with more confirmation. Yahuah'S, Psalms, chapter 89, verse 37. It shall be established forever as the moon and as a faithful witness in heaven. A witness is one who testifies. A witness must be present. A witness must be seen. A witness that cannot be seen cannot testify to anything. An invisible witness is no witness at all. Scripture does not call the moon a suggestion. It does not call the moon a theory. It calls the moon a faithful witness. And a witness bears record by appearing, not by hiding. If the moon is a faithful witness in heaven, then the moon must testify to time in a way that can be observed. That testimony begins when the moon appears. The moon bears witness by being seen. The moon declares time by appearing. Therefore, appearance in Scripture always refers to what is visible. Now that Scripture has clearly defined what the word appear means, we must define the second word used by Scripture, beginning. Just as before, we will not assume the meaning. We will allow language and Scripture to define the word in its proper context. The dictionary definition of beginning. Beginning means the point in time at which something starts, the first part of something, the earliest identifiable stage of a process, the origin or initial moment of a cycle. A beginning is the start, not what comes after the start. A beginning is identifiable, not hidden. A beginning is not a continuation. It is not a midpoint. It is not a workday. It is not invisible. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 1 verse 1. In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 1 verse 5. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Scripture does not say the first workday. It says the first day. Shamut, Exodus chapter 12 verse 2. This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. Yahuah'S, Ezekiel chapter 46 verse 1. Thus saith Yahuah, the gate of the inner court that looketh toward the east shall be shut the 6 working days, but on the Shabbat it shall be open, and in the day of the new moon it shall be open. The renewed moon is called a day. It is separate from the 6 working days. That means it comes before the work cycle begins. Scripture has now defined both words. Appear means to become visible. Beginning means the first identifiable starting point. Nothing has been interpreted. Everything has only been defined. Before any claim can be dismissed as imagination or conjecture, we must first establish the witnesses. Debaryam, Deuteronomy chapter 19 verse 15. At the mouth of 2 witnesses or at the mouth of 3 witnesses shall the matter be established. We now have 3 verifiable witnesses establishing the truth. The first witness is Enoch chapter 73 in the R.H. Charles translation, which states the moon becomes visible and constitutes the first phase of the moon. That first phase is called Hadash. The second witness is also in Enoch chapter 73, but in the Sefer translation, which states that at that time the moon appears and becomes the beginning of the month. The third witness is in Tehillim, Psalms chapter 89 verse 37, which declares that the moon itself is a faithful witness in heaven. A witness must be seen to testify. The dark moon cannot be the beginning of the month because it cannot be seen. An unseen witness cannot testify. Scripture calls the moon a faithful witness, not a hidden one. By Scripture's own standard, the matter is established. As we conclude, we have proven by Scripture that the beginning of the month is not hidden, it is not dark, and it is not delayed. The beginning of the month is day 1, marked by the visible appearance of the first phase of the moon called Hadash. This is not tradition. This is not interpretation. This is what the Scripture says. Before we continue, understand this. Everything we have established in this lesson is the foundation. Now that the beginning of the month has been clearly defined by Scripture, the next step is to identify how Yahuwah determines his Shabats. Continued in part 2, how the moon identifies the Shabbat. In the next lesson, we will show how the moon determines Yahuwah's Shabats and why the Shabbat cannot be separate from the lunar cycle. If you have questions as we move forward, please place them in the comments below. Your questions will help guide the next teachings in this series. We will continue line upon line. Shalom.